In 7 minutes, Wild Track with Sue Ingle and Michael Jordan reporting on pine martens, the common seal and a new award scheme. That follows John Craven'S Newsround.
Pope John Paul II, the world waits to learn if he'll come to Britain. Hello again. In a few minutes' time, Pope John Paul II will address a huge crowd in St. Peter's in Rome. But his message will be listened to most anxiously in Britain. He's expected to make an important announcement about his planned trip here, a trip which has involved months of planning and millions of pounds being spent on preparations. And if we hear of his decision during the programme, we'll bring it to you. 2 high-ranking Catholic priests, Archbishop Warlock from Liverpool and Archbishop Winning from Scotland, have been in Rome since Monday night trying to persuade the Pope to come. This was the scene outside St. Peter's in Rome earlier today. Before the crowds of pilgrims were allowed into the square, last-minute talks between the English archbishops and the Pope's closest advisers were going on in the private rooms behind the great church. Just as politicians in Britain and in Argentina are anxiously waiting for news from the United Nations peace talks, it's thought that the Pope can't decide to come to Britain until there's news of peace. He's the leader of the world's 700 million Catholics. Over half live in South America, 20 million in Argentina alone. If serious fighting broke out between Britain and Argentina whilst he was in Britain, the Catholics in Argentina would feel betrayed. The church there has not spoken about the invasion of the Falklands, but this week Argentines saw leading churchmen bless the military leaders who ordered the Falklands invasion. What makes the Pope's decision so difficult is that if he stays away, Britain's Catholics will be very disappointed and the great preparations will be wasted. But if he visits Britain, many Catholics throughout the world, and especially in South America, will feel he's siding with Britain. To avoid that, Mrs. Thatcher has cancelled a planned meeting with the Pope and has asked him to come just for the sake of Catholic people here. Well, meanwhile, Mrs. Thatcher has spoken again about the Falklands conflict and the Argentine invaders on the islands. She repeated on the radio this morning that Argentine forces must leave before the future could be discussed. The Prime Minister also said that the Argentine government's response to Britain's latest peace proposals was not very encouraging. It looks as if the long attempts at the United Nations to find peace have failed. Meanwhile, a BBC transmitter on Ascension Island has been taken over by the government to broadcast British government programmes about the Falklands to the Argentine troops on the islands and to Argentina itself. Off the Falklands, the task force has been on the alert, waiting for orders from Britain. The number of Harrier jets has been doubled. The whole fleet is now together, including the big troop ships. There have been no reports so far today of fighting, but the feeling is an attempt to retake the Falkland Islands might be made very soon. Thousands of workers in Britain's hospitals started a 24-hour strike today. They stayed away as a protest because they haven't been offered the pay rise they asked for. Support seems to be strongest amongst what's called the ancillary workers, people like kitchen staff and porters. Though hospital life is being disrupted and the government says patients could be put at risk, emergency cases and accident victims are still being admitted. Well, now some news from the far eastern country of Kampuchea, which used to be called Cambodia. School children there are helping to reopen some of the country's schools. Many of them were destroyed or shut down during the harsh regime of the last government under Pol Pot. But now pupils are working with builders in many places to help repair damaged classrooms so that their schools can run normally again. Many youngsters have several years of education to catch up, and there are problems now because so many teachers left the country while the schools were closed. But some schools are already teaching more than basic reading and writing. These students in the capital, Phnom Penh, are learning traditional dances. School children are being encouraged to learn some of the country's traditional skills like wood carving and mask building, and many of the girls are taught weaving and spinning. Outside the towns, some schools have small farms where the children learn how to care for the animals. In London, wildlife groups are trying to save a small piece of remarkable land. It's called the Gunnersbury Triangle, and by chance it's become a natural wilderness in the middle of London's sprawling buildings. Mary Downing reports.
The Gunnersbury Triangle is 6 acres of British Rail land, cut off on all sides by the railway lines. It's been undisturbed for nearly 100 years and has become a wilderness where plant and animal life have flourished. But now a company wants to build a warehouse on it, and that's sparked off a row.
British Rail say that if the company who wants to build on the triangle can get the go-ahead from the local council, then it's their duty to rent out this land rather than let it go to waste.
But the local wildlife group don't agree. They say the land is far from going to waste. Anne Mayo told me why.
Because it's so unusual for children in cities to see a real woodland. We've got the chance here to provide a real woodland for them to visit from schools and to have nature trails and that sort of thing.
And what sort of wildlife is here that they could see?
Masses and masses, everything you could think of, from insects right up to herons, foxes, all sorts. 5 different sorts of butterfly have been seen from the edge alone. I don't know of another woodland that's grown up completely naturally. Certainly nowhere near the centre of London as this one is.
The Nature Conservancy Council is also concerned about the fate of the triangle and have asked the local council to put off making a decision about building until a proper survey of the wildlife there can be done.
The Rubik Cube has started another craze, the craze to invent a new puzzle as popular as Rubik's original. A government report says Britain's inventors have been struggling to invent toys similar to the Rubik Cube, and it seems people may be ready to buy a new kind of game or puzzle. Toy shops say they're not selling as many cubes as they were a year ago. And finally, there's still no news from Rome about the Pope's visit, but there might be some in time for the evening news at 20 to 6. Well, that's all from Newsround today. See you tomorrow. Until then, bye-bye.